So the government has just voted to continue to work from home for another 11 weeks because obviously and understandably they're worried about catching coronavirus, they're worried about getting ill, they want to stay safe. That's totally reasonable, but apparently the rest of us are supposed to go into the office immediately, and that's because otherwise pret-a-manger might go bust. So it's good to know priorities. It's members of the Conservative Party, branches of pret-a-manger, riff-raff like the rest of us. Schools as well, of course, are being sent back. And I know people are going to say, well, children, they're not likely to get particularly ill, even if they do catch coronavirus, which, of course, is absolutely true. But I don't know if you've ever been to a school. I went to one years ago, but I remember it quite distinctly. What schools are not like is sort of isolated pods where children just live and only interact with each other. That's not really how it works. There are also teachers and other members of staff who are adults, and they're there kind of all the time, so it doesn't go all Lord of the Flies. And then at the end of the day, kids go home to, wait for it, here it is, more adults, including quite often elderly relatives and carers and people who might have other conditions, etc., and who might be vulnerable. So here's what is going to happen as a result. I wish I didn't have to say this, but it's just a fact. There's going to be a second wave. Of course there is. To be honest, it's pretty much already started, and we haven't even sent the schools back yet. It's going to blow up, and it's going to blow up in the middle of flu season. It's going to be horrific, right? And it's going to lead to more lockdowns. Localised ones, definitely. National one, quite possibly. That absolutely could happen. And bear in mind, this new lockdown will take place in much worse weather conditions than the first one. So now when you're queuing up for an hour and a half outside your local pharmacy to pick up a prescription, you'll be doing it in the freezing cold and the pissing rain. And it's going to be a lot less pleasant than the first time around. On top of which, people are going to be much more reluctant to stick ruthlessly to the rules like many of us did the first time around, because we've gotten used to it. We know which rules we're comfortable breaking. People are always a little bit more slack the second time around. They kind of know that the crackdowns aren't being taken all that seriously. There's not that many people getting fined. People just don't take it so seriously. It's a thing which I like to refer to as the Dominic Cummings effect, which is when you look round and go, well, if that posh a-hole thinks the rules don't apply to him, why the hell should they apply to me? Despite the fact that apparently, as someone who works for the government, he is more vulnerable and has to work from home. Let's not get distracted, shall we? The only thing that would make it different, the only thing that could save the situation is if we had an effective track and trace system in place, and we should have, because we've known about the need for one since March. Other parts of the world have had one since March, and we still don't have one. And we not even don't have one. We're getting worse. Right, I get tested every week for COVID because I'm on this vaccine trial. That's been true for about 4 months. And when I first started getting tested, my results came back in less than 24 hours. They now take 3 days, 3.5 days to come back. And that means that if I have got COVID, that's another 4 or 5 days of contacts to trace. That's another 4 or 5 days of which shops were you in? Where did you go? Who did you speak to? Who did you interact with? If I had symptoms and was isolating until I got my results back, it would get harder and harder to do so. At some point, well, I'll have to go to the shops. At some point, well, I'll have to leave the house, or I'm missing out on work, I'm losing money. It's getting to be a problem. We need a test system that works really quickly, gets results straight back, so anyone can get a test, and there are still people out there asking for tests and being told they can't have one. We also need an effective trace system, and that means people writing down where they've been, people giving their email, handing these things in, and people downloading an app that works. And all of that requires trust. It requires us to trust that the government will handle our data in a sensible and responsible way. And yet, only last week a friend of mine went and was tested for COVID, and they sent her her result and said that she didn't have COVID and she could go back to her normal life. And then, a few hours later, they sent her a whole string of other people's COVID results with their full names and dates of birth on and all kinds of other identifying information. So not only do people not trust the government, but guess what? They're absolutely damn right not to. And it's really hard to see how we'll get out of a world of wave after wave of rises in infections and lockdown after lockdown until we get to a point where we have a competent government that we honestly believe we can trust. So sorry about that.